Hello everyone. This week we're going to be wrapping up part 2 of the Omega Blade, and then next week we have something different, I promise. We'll finish up the Omega Blade eventually, but at least for next week I got something different planned, because I've actually been writing more videos. I've been writing more videos. Anyway, let's jump right in with Chapter 12. Once their dart wounds finished healing, the 5 of them walked into the next room, and their weapons and armor reappeared as soon as they crossed the threshold. The circular room was around 100 feet across and had 7 other doors of varying sizes spaced out equally. The stone floor had a smaller circle, about 20 feet across, marked in the center. The door directly across from theirs was the largest, measuring at least 8 feet tall and wide, and suddenly words appeared above it. To wield this blade, you must be a warrior of great skill. Protect yourself and slay your enemies. Val strapped his shield to his arm, and steel plate armor manifested over his clothes. Then he led the others into the center. Once they were all inside the marked circle, the doors to the left and right of the largest door opened, and 20 zombies emerged from each one. A moment later, the largest door opened, and 10 skeleton warriors walked out, each carrying a wooden shield and some kind of one-handed melee weapon. They quickly realized that the zombies and skeletons consisted of humans, tritons, boreads, elves, and tieflings in equal numbers. "Shit," Val said, looking around. "We don't have any blunt weapons, do we?" "Nope," Lux replied. "Just shields and sharp things." "Then you're with me against the skeletons," he said. "Aaron, Laric, Nephrius, don't let him bite you." Lux took a Triton zombie down with an arrow, then switched to her sword and shield as Laric shot and killed a boread zombie. Having started with his spear, Val switched to his short sword, knowing the longer weapon would be useless once he got within shield bashing range. An elf skeleton charged ahead of the others, its spiked mace held high, and Val swung his left arm in a sideways punching motion. The blunt edge of his shield connected with the skeleton's jaw, hard enough to break its neck and knock it to the ground, where he finished it off. Nearby, Aaron speared a tiefling zombie's brain with her trident. Laric took down an elf zombie with another arrow, and Nephrius scored a double kill by using his scythe to decapitate a boread zombie and a human zombie that were standing one in front of the other. In the time it took them to kill 5 more zombies, Val and Lux were each able to take down a tiefling skeleton. A boread zombie grabbed Nephrius from behind, but Laric shot it before it could bite him. The 3 of them were able to cut down the remaining zombies with only a bruise or 2 between them. Then they each picked up a wooden shield and helped Val and Lux take down the remaining 5 skeletons. Laric and Lux's arrows inexplicably reappeared in their quivers, and the 5 of them returned to the center circle. The door they had come from opened, as did the ones on either side of it, and 10 lizard folk emerged from each one. They stood between 6 and 7 feet tall and had tails between 3 and 4 feet long. Their skin was various shades of gray, green, black, and brown. The lizard folk carried a variety of weapons. Their swords and polearms were made of stone or bronze, and their shields were made of anything from bronze to wood to turtle shells. A few even carried barbed weapons that resembled javelins. They started forming 3 rows of 10, making it easier to figure out that 10 of them had swords and shields, 10 of them had shields and polearms, and 10 had polearms and barbed darts. Not wanting to let their numerically superior enemy finish forming up, Lux fired an arrow, killing one that was holding a 2-handed warhammer and had several barbed darts on its back. Another threw an identical dart, narrowly missing Laric and Aaron. Laric fired his bow, but his target blocked the arrow with her shield. Val hurled one of his javelins, piercing a turtle shell shield and killing its owner. And Nephrius scored a double kill by throwing one of his sickles, one with the initial throw and another when he called it back to his hand. The remaining lizard folk finished forming up, so Aaron fired a powerful jet of water from her trident at the center of the formation, killing 3 with the force of the blast and knocking 5 more off their feet. The 7 lizard folk left in the back row each threw a barbed dart. Val and Lux each blocked one with their shields. Nephrius intercepted one that would have hit Laric, and Aaron dodged 2 in quick succession. Arrows from Laric killed 2 more, and a javelin from Val killed a 3rd. One lizardfolk raised her bronze scimitar and let out a battle cry, and the 7 others that were left in the front row followed her as she broke formation and charged. The leader leapt at Val, dodging his spear thrust and slashing at him with her scimitar, but he rushed her, using his shield to push her off her feet. An arrow from Laric finished her off, so Val turned and stabbed another lizardfolk from behind before he attacked the elf. Aaron ducked under a slash from a lizardfolk's saber, then thrust her trident into his unarmored torso. Before she could pull it out, a kick to the chest sent her sprawling, and she scrambled to her feet as her new attacker advanced on her. Drawing her hooked sword, she parried a few slashes, then decapitated him. Despite their numbers, the lizard folk only posed a slightly greater threat than the zombies and skeletons, and soon Val killed the last 2 by impaling them both on his spear. Like before, Laric and Lux's arrows reappeared in their quivers. They returned to the center circle, and the bruises and scratches they had received quickly healed. 3 doors opened, the big one in the front of them, and the ones to the left and right, and 5 direwolves walked out of each one. Each one was around 9 feet long and proportionally tall. "Aaron, how much boiling water do you have?" Val asked as the huge wolves began circling them. "Not enough to kill them," she replied, "but I can definitely hurt them." "Everyone down!" The others ducked, and Aaron fired boiling water over their heads, turning as she did. She only managed to kill 1 direwolf, but only 2 managed to avoid getting scalded. 5 were burned badly enough that they tucked their tails between their legs and retreated, only to drop dead as soon as they reached the doors. The 9 remaining direwolves attacked. One tried to bite Val's head off, but he slammed his shield into the side of its head and drove a spear into its neck. Another dropped after taking 5 arrows from Laeric, and a third took Nefrius' scythe blade up through its lower jaw and into its brain. One managed to tackle Aaron from behind while she was focused on another. It bit down on her left shoulder, and although her Leviathan armor protected her from the fangs, the wolf's bite strength was strong enough to bruise her skin through the armor. Aaron cried out in pain, and Lux saved her by stabbing the wolf in the neck. They dispatched the last 5 direwolves and retrieved their weapons, then returned to the center. The first door opened, and they all gagged and held their noses as 10 ghasts walked out. Some had their tongues hanging out. Some were mumbling in whatever language they had spoken in life. "Time to find out if the steel in these is made of regular iron or cold iron," Val said, referring to his sword and spear. "Don't let him touch you," Laeric reminded the others. "Definitely don't get bitten." He and Lux took down the first ghast with 2 arrows each, and the other 9 split up, circling in both directions. One ghast charged at Laeric, only to be decapitated by Aaron. Another grabbed him from behind, but as an elf, he was unaffected by its paralytic touch. "Huh?" it asked, confused. Laeric pulled away and drew his broadsword. The ghast opened its mouth, but before either of them could attack, it was gutted from behind by Nefrius' scythe. The tiefling was promptly grabbed by a third ghast and collapsed, paralyzed. Aaron saved him from being bitten by hurling her trident into the back of its head. Lux was also grabbed after claiming another kill, and by the time Val stabbed the last ghast in the face with his Xiphos, only he and Laeric were still standing. They dragged the others back to the center. Once everyone had recovered, the biggest door opened, and 5 giant scorpions crawled out. Their sizes varied somewhat, but they were all between 7 and 10 feet tall. Realizing he was the only one with no slashing weapons, Val quickly came up with a plan. "Pair up," he said. "Laeric and Nefrius, Aaron and Lux. One person draws its attention, the other gets behind it and cuts off its tail." "What about you?" Nefrius asked. "I'll distract the ones you're not fighting." Aaron flashed him a smile. "I appreciate the sentiment, but the fact that you have a steel shield makes you the best choice to play defense." "She's right," Lux said, drawing her sword and holding her shield. Val sighed. "Fine. Lux and I will draw their attention. Aaron and Nefrius cut off their tails. Laeric, aim for the eyes and mouths." They moved out of the circle, and Val and Lux each put their back against the middle of a wall while the others maneuvered around the scorpions. One scorpion closed in on Val, and he blocked one of its claws with his shield, then tried and failed to stab it in the face with his spear. He focused only on his attacker, knowing that he couldn't afford to be distracted. He couldn't get too close, or he would be in range of the scorpion's stinger. After 90 seconds that felt like several minutes, Aaron sliced off the scorpion's tail with her hook swords, and Val rushed in and drove his spear into its face between its eyes. Looking around, he saw Lux finishing off the biggest scorpion by stabbing the top of its head repeatedly. They stepped into the center, replenishing their arrows and healing their injuries. Then they walked through the largest door, which hadn't closed after letting the scorpions out. The next room had 5 doors on the far side. Deciding to see what they had to do, Nefrius walked into the center one, and it immediately closed behind him. Shrugging, he walked out into the next room, where his weapons and armor vanished for the second time in less than an hour. The room was twice as big as the one with the healing water. A nymph with tan skin and dark red hair sat on a stone throne in the center of the room, and there was another door directly behind her. There was a stone basin the size of a bathtub against the wall to his right, and a small brown ceramic bowl had been placed on the edge. A bowl of identical size and a lighter shade of brown was sitting on the right armrest of the nymph's throne, and a tall but narrow hourglass was on the left armrest. Looking up, Nefrius saw words above the stone basin. "To wield this blade, you must know balance. Drink the water from the basin to begin." Approaching the basin, Nefrius filled the bowl with water and drank it. It tasted no different than ordinary water. "Fill it again." Startled, the tiefling turned to see the nymph standing in front of her throne, holding her bowl in both hands. Nodding, he followed her instructions before approaching her. She was exactly as tall as him and had gorgeous emerald-colored eyes that could have made his knees weak if he was attracted to women. Behind her, he saw that the hourglass had been flipped over and sand was starting to fall. "The water you drank is poisoned," the nymph said, in the same calm tone she had used when she first spoke. "When all the sand has fallen, you will die. The water in my bowl is the cure. Take this bowl from me, and I will take your bowl from you. To succeed, you must take my bowl without spilling a drop." Based on the amount of sand and how fast it was falling, Nefrius estimated that he had no more than 3 minutes. Taking a deep breath, he moved both hands at the same time, holding his bowl close to his chest with his right hand and reaching for her bowl with his left. Being ambidextrous, he was equally fast with both hands, and he knew that most of the nymph's challengers had likely been right-handed. The nymph immediately established herself as swift and nimble by lifting her bowl overhead with her left hand while simultaneously swatting his left hand away with her right. She reached for his bowl, and when he stepped back to keep it out of reach, half of his water spilled out onto the floor. "Refill," she said, assuming her original position of holding the bowl in both hands. Nefrius could see that less than a quarter of the sand had fallen as he refilled his bowl from the basin. Reaching the nymph, he faked a grab with his right hand, then tried to snatch her bowl with his left. She again slapped his hand away, but when he reached for her bowl, he was able to move it out of her reach without spilling. Smoothly moving the bowl to his left hand, he swatted her right hand away with his, then reached for her bowl. Unfortunately, she took a single step to the left at just the right moment to send her sprawling forward. He dropped the bowl to catch himself, then refilled it from the basin without having to be told. Remembering one advantage he had over his friends, Nefrius wrapped his prehensile tail around the bowl and held it behind him. Although doing it meant he couldn't see it, he had been practicing holding things with his tail since adolescence, and he was confident enough to try it with his life on the line. Spreading his arms wide, he faked grabbing a couple times with each hand to keep her on her toes, then went for a real grab with his right hand. In response to Nefrius' new approach, the nymph changed hers as well, making no attempt to grab his bowl and instead focusing entirely on keeping hold of hers. Despite his best efforts, he couldn't quite get through her defenses. When her bowl was in her right hand, he moved his to his left hand, then grabbed her right wrist with his tail. Not missing a beat, he reached out with his right hand, only for her to chop his tail with the side of her left hand. Yelling in pain, he lost his grip on her wrist, and she pulled it away. So he tried to grab the bowl itself with his tail. In an impressive display of balance and coordination, the nymph took a hop step backward without spilling a drop, despite holding her bowl in one hand, and Nefrius stumbled just enough to spill some of his. Less than a quarter of the sand was left after he refilled his bowl. Realizing he couldn't beat the nymph hand to hand, Nefrius closed his eyes and thought about his other options. None of them were great, so he settled on the one that was the exact opposite of his initial approach. "Emerald-eyed nymph, guardian of the Omega Blade," he said after opening his eyes. "I humbly request that you accept my bowl in exchange for yours." Not waiting for a response, he held his bowl out in his left hand. A smile appeared on the nymph's face, and she handed her bowl to him as she took his. "Well done, Nefrius," she said as he drank the water from her bowl. "Physical balance is important for every warrior, but what is equally important is to have balance between violence and peace." Nefrius was surprised to be the first one to enter the next room. Lux walked in less than a minute later, followed shortly by Leoric and Val. Erin was the last to arrive, and when she finally did, words appeared over the door on the far side of the room. "To wield this blade, you must have a keen sense of direction. Reach the end of this corridor or be lost forever." In case anyone's wondering, the poison was real, Erin said offhandedly. "I barely finished in time, and I could feel it starting to fuck with my stomach right at the end." Their weapons and armor reappeared once they walked through the door, and Val led the others down a hallway just wide enough for two people to walk next to each other. After a couple hundred feet, they reached a circular room with no other exit. "A dead end," Lux said. "Fantastic." They turned back, but when they reached the end of the hallway, the door was gone, replaced by a T intersection. "Left or right?" Val asked. Erin and Leoric voted left, and Lux and Nefrius voted right. "Alright, let's try left." They turned down the left hallway, and after walking a couple hundred feet, they reached another intersection. They unanimously agreed to turn right, and after walking nearly a quarter of a mile, they reached a dead end. They turned around, but after walking less than half the length of the previous hallway, they reached another dead end. "It's a good thing we're sober," Lux remarked. They spent over an hour navigating the magical hallway, but despite taking turns leading, they were unable to find any sort of pattern. They stopped in the circular room of a dead end for a break, and as he sipped some of his water, Val's eyes widened. "I got it!" he blurted out. "What?" Nefrius asked. "Maybe we're overthinking it," he said, standing up. "Maybe we need to treat intersections like dead ends." Erin's eyes widened. "Val, I could kiss you. Actually, you know what?" She grabbed his face and did exactly that. Once Val overcame his brief shock, he led the others back down the hallway. After 4 dead ends in a row, they reached an intersection, but instead of picking left or right, they turned around and went back. After another dead end, they did the same thing at 2 more intersections, and when they reached the end of the next hallway, they found a door. Stepping through it, they walked out into a massive room that could almost be considered a cavern. There was no visible roof, yet a dozen huge cylindrical pillars rose up into the darkness. They were arranged in a circle around a weapon rack with a single sheathed sword on it. It appeared to be between 3 and 4 feet long. They walked out into the room, and as soon as they stepped into the pillar's perimeter, the weapon rack was lowered into a hole in the floor and replaced by a large stone tablet with words carved into it. "Only one may wield this blade. The last one alive will claim the prize." "What?" Val asked. "No way. No sword is worth killing my best friends." "Yeah, fuck that," Lux said. The others voiced their agreement. The stone tablet suddenly began rising, with more of it being revealed. Once it stopped, they saw more words on it. Choose the one who will wield this blade. All must agree or all will perish. Val stepped forward, then stopped and turned to face the others. Is everyone okay with me taking it in exchange for half my share of the profits from selling the armor? He asked. Of course, Aaron said. Without you, we wouldn't even be here. The others voiced their agreement. Turning around, Val saw that the stone tablet had been replaced by a weapon rack. Unlike before, it had words across the top. Defend yourselves. All 5 of them drew their weapons, and a moment later a white-skinned human woman with gray eyes and short strawberry blonde hair stepped out from behind one of the pillars across from Val. Laeric immediately knocked an arrow and aimed it at her. Kaylee? Val asked. Took you long enough, Kaylee said, the blades of Orthrus sheathed across her armored back and a javelin in her right hand. He shook his head. If you got here first, why didn't you just take the sword? See, that was the original plan, she said, taking a step closer. Show up at Dawnhill with the Omega Blade and hopefully see the look on your face when you realize I'm the one who got it. Then I saw you visiting Dad and decided to follow you and make sure she was cut off when Laeric fired his arrow, but it was intercepted by an arrow from the right. Their heads snapped in that direction, and an Aasimar woman in her mid-60s stepped out from behind one of the pillars. Standing an inch taller than Lux and wearing chainmail, she had emerald-colored skin, long silver hair, and gold eyes with no pupils. Make sure you saw me take it, Kaylee finished. Thank you, Leilani. 3 more people stepped out from behind the pillars. The first was the drow woman Laeric had seen when they left Goldhaven. She had gray skin, lavender eyes, and short white hair. She was an inch shorter than Aaron, wore adamantine armor, had a sheathed rapier above her left thigh, and carried a hand crossbow. The second was a dragonborn man who was even taller than Leilani. He had gold eyes and red skin, wore lightweight steel armor, and carried a scimitar and heater shield. The third was a minotaur man, with brown skin, black fur, and orange eyes. Standing over 8 feet tall, he was unarmored, carried a 2-handed warhammer, and had a spiked flail on his belt. Kaylee quickly introduced the drow woman as Aliavin Arabeth, the dragonborn man as Memphir Segrex, and the minotaur man as Viazara Stonestriker. Nice to meet you, I'm sure, Val said dryly. Kaylee, just walk away. No one has to get hurt. If that was my highest priority, I would have just taken the sword and left, she pointed out. Have you forgotten how close you came to losing your head? How could I? He took a deep breath. I thought you cared about me. I do, Val, she said, drumming her fingers against the shaft of her javelin. I always have, but that doesn't mean you're more important than my own goals. And what are... Val was cut off when Kaylee hurled her javelin. He leaned left to dodge it, only to hear Lux cry out in pain. Turning, he saw the javelin had impaled her lower abdomen because she had been too busy keeping an eye on Memphir to react in time. Val turned back just as Kaylee took off running, and he did the same. Time seemed to slow down as they dashed towards the weapon rack. Val saw Viozara charging from the left, but he paid the Minotaur no mind. He reached the center first and came to a stop, but before he could even touch the Omega Blade, Kaylee slammed into him at full speed, knocking him to the ground. He saw her pick up the sheathed sword, then he felt the ground under him start to rumble. Suddenly the room was rising up, but the pillars stayed in place, making it look like they were sinking. Looking around, Val saw Aaron kneeling next to Lux, who had purple blood on both sides of her body. Memphir's hammer suddenly slammed into the back of his head, and the world went dark. Val woke up in the most comfortable bed of his life. The back of his head was a little sore as he sat up. Looking around, he saw Lux curled up facing the wall on the other bed in the room, and Aaron reading a book in what looked like a comfortable chair. Her trident was propped up against the wall to her right. Welcome to the Goldhaven Infirmary, she said, marking her page and setting her book down. How's Lux? He asked, glancing at their Boread friend. Alive, Aaron assured him. They were able to fix the internal damage. He let out a sigh of relief. Good. What's wrong? It's over. What is? Dawnhill, he said, laying back to stare at the ceiling. We might as well drop out, or at least I'm going to. Why, Val? Aaron asked. Kaylee has the Omega Blade, he pointed out. Without a serious skill advantage, we're fucked, especially once we get to the final round. There was a moment of silence. I love you. What? Val asked, caught off guard, less by what she had said and more by the offhanded way she had said it. That's what I've been feeling for you lately, she explained, folding her hands. I don't mean romantically. It's not familial either. It's something else. Something new. Oh. He looked at her, unsure of how to respond. You don't have to say it, she assured him. You don't have to say anything. I feel like I should, but I don't know what to say. You mean the world to me, Val, Aaron said, leaning forward. More than every other friend I have ever had. More than every sexual and romantic partner, you are the person I trust more than any other. Closing his eyes, Val took a deep breath. Forget what I said. She raised an eyebrow. Which part? Dropping out of Dawnhill. He sat up and looked her in the eyes. All 5 of us are going to the final round, and we're going to take down Kaylee together. Eren smiled. Now you're talking. So ends Chapter 12, and so ends Part 2. For those of you who have been watching these videos, thank you. I appreciate literally every view I get. I have something different planned for next week, but I will pick up with Part 3 of the Omega Blade, probably sometime in the next month. That's all for now. Stay safe in these crazy times.